Good morning, everyone, because it is morning here, and we have a first in the history. It's not very long history, but we have a first here. We have a in-house guest, in-studio guest, with Jacob, Dr. Jacob Pursley. We're just gonna jump into it because we've already been talking a little bit, and you guys know what the title is. Just wanted to encourage you guys as you're watching this. Go ahead and share it out on Facebook and whatever else other platform you use, and get people into this. I would really want to see Turks in this. So it would be really interesting. By the way, I've discovered there's a number of I knew about these people. I didn't know they were Turkish. There's a number of people out there that are doing work against Islam, I would say, but I didn't know they were Turkish. So one of them, someone told me, it was Hatun Tash.
Yes, Hatun Tash.
Hatun Tash has like single-handedly brought down the Islamic world, it seems like, because she found all these alternate Qurans.
That's exactly right.
In Africa, and it's become big news. Jay Smith deals with it, and now other people are. And then I found out the apostate prophet.
Yes, he also is.
He's
Turkish.
also Turkish. So you knew these. I didn't, because I was watching a live stream yesterday, and then they asked him where he was from, and he said, "Well, Turkey, Germany." And I was like, "Oh, this guy's a Turk too."
He is. You know what's interesting is he really represents a lot of the modern day secular Turks that have. There's been a trend to move away from Islam because of two factors. One was ISIS. When ISIS started to enter into Syria and to Iraq, it's really fascinating. It was the first time in Turkey, so I was in Turkey for 15 years, but I just want to mention this quickly, that nobody questioned Islam in Turkey. Nobody, you don't say, well, what is Islam? What do we really believe? Nobody ever thought about that. When they saw the atrocities that ISIS was doing against the Yazidis and all of these things that they were posting live, for the first time in our church in Turkey, and we have churches in Turkey made up of Turkish and Kurdish background believers that were former Muslims and now Christians. But what was fascinating is that members from our church said our family members are calling us for the first time and saying, so in Christianity, do you cut heads off too?
Oh, wow.
They would say that direct. They said, so why did you leave Islam and why do you think Christianity is true? But it was the first time that ever had happened.
That conversation.
So ISIS was a factor, and the other factor was the rise of the AK party, which is Tayyip Erdogan's party back in 2002 when he came to power with his group. And there has been this, I would not say slow, but a pretty fast-paced Islamization of Turkey. And so you have this huge movement, I would say up to the millions now, where people have rejected Islam and they've become atheist. I call them
pre-Christians.
They're pre-Christians, but what they're doing is they're rejecting the Islamic God and the Islamic faith. They're calling themselves atheists, but they're also lumping Christianity into that because they have been taught that really, there's no difference between Islam and Christianity. So guys like that, it's they're definitely on a path, I would say.
Okay, so that was a quick introduction. So kind of something that I would share about your past. Let's take a step back.
Sure.
Okay. Tell us about your doctoral work. Tell us about your PhD, what that was in, what kind of work you did, and then we'll talk about your time in Turkey and all the other stuff surrounding you.
Sure. So I've been in really full-time ministry. The Lord called me into ministry in 1998. And that's really the time I met the Lord. And so I would say that all of my work in academics has had a practical purpose to aid in the ministry that the Lord has given me. So whether it was studying pastoral studies, because I knew that we were going to be doing a lot of pastoral work, or was it I studied Islam and I did a master's degree thesis on a horrible subject, actually. Really bad. It was on called the rejection of all uzl and the proper treatment of non-Muslim captive women. And basically it had to do with Islamic rape. And nobody had talked about that. But that really opened my eyes to a lot of the realities of Islam, getting into that. And then I studied in seminary and did a focus on apologetics specifically to answer Muslim objections. And then the doctoral work had to do with discipling believers from a Muslim background, really to...
Okay. We had some technical difficulties, everyone. Don't know why, but it seems like our internet might have cut out. And yeah, we would have lost the connection here. We had some technical... Okay. So we should be back now. Can you guys give a thumbs up or something like that if you're still on here and you're seeing this? Again, no idea. Hey, for you American folks who don't have issues like that, welcome to Armenia. So
it's a great country.
It is.
I love this place. I love this country.
Okay, so you spent how many years in Turkey?
So I moved to Turkey in the year 2002 with my wife, and we were there for approximately 15 years.
Okay.
And that's before we moved to Armenia.
Okay, so now you are a unique individual to me, okay? Because you speak a bunch of languages.
Well, I try.
Right.
I'm from Arkansas. I'm still trying to learn to speak English, man.
You have a gift. Because one of the things I've realized being in Armenia is how much I take for granted my Armenian language skills, right? Like, I was born into it. I speak Armenian, and I know it can improve, but I haven't really been working on it. And it's and then I realize I see you, and then I see people like you, and you guys are speaking Armenian. You're developing, like there's change and growth and stuff, and I'm like, oh man, I feel guilty. I need to work on this because this guy is just like doing really well. No, you're doing fine. So you speak Armenian.
Well,
yeah, you're in there. Okay, you might not consider that like fluent or something like that. Well, English is a given. You speak Turkish.
Turkish, yes, very well.
You speak Turkish very well. You speak
Kurmanji.
Kurmanji, which is a Turkish.
It's actually a Kurdish in the Kurdish language families. It's predominantly spoken in Turkey and in northeastern Syria, and you can find a variation of the dialect in Iraq as well. They call it Batini, but it's
also in
Kurmanji.
Armenia.
Yes, they do speak it among the Yazidis Kurds. That's correct.
Kurds speak it in Armenia because
right.
I've heard that. So, Jacob is multilingual. Since you lived in Turkey, okay, and you specifically lived and worked there with Turks and Kurds.
Yes.
We're gonna have our conversation is gonna revolve around something a bit different than what people speak about when it comes to Islam. Okay, because I guess this is true in Christianity to a certain extent as well, that you see different variations and kinds.
Sure.
Given the like social context, right? The cultural context that Christianity is in. And what a lot of Westerners might not realize, especially when it comes to evangelism, right? This is an apologetics channel, so evangelism is always there, right? Well, you can't do apologetics if you're not thinking about evangelism, or else you're wasting your time.
Absolutely.
I'm a firm believer in that. If you're learning apologetics, I really hope that people who are watching this, the time you spend watching, learning, reading apologetics content, you're actually putting it into practice, engaging with people. So you want to know the kind of mindset, because you can't just like, for example, just in my personal experience, you can't learn about Sunni Islam and how to deal with Saudis and then use that against a Persian.
Right.
Like, number one, they're not Sunni. Number two, they're not Arab. So you got like a religious and right, a cultural dynamic to this. Right. Like it's worlds apart. Their view of Islam is actually worlds apart because of Shia Islam and Sunni Islam, but also the cultural, just the way the people speak to you and their culture.
Absolutely.
Right?
I remember when I took a class called Introduction to Islam, my professor had about 3 doctorates, probably memorized every hadith that was out there. Just brilliant man. And when I told him I was living in Turkey, he said, I have to confess, I know nothing about Turkish Islam. And he said, maybe you could help me out with that. And I'm like here trying to learn Islam myself. But I had lived in Turkey for some time, but it really opened my eyes to the various Islams. I remember when he taught the course, he said, I actually like to call this course Islams, because there's not one Islam. There's variations of thousands of types of Islams. And it's really true. I mean, when you look at the 83, 84 million people, even in Turkey, it's kind of like a reader response kind of thing. You ask somebody, they all have a different view of what Islam is and their version. Well, Muhammad to me is this, or the Quran, Islam to me is this. So it's hard to even nail down, this is, everybody knows the 5 pillars.
Yeah.
There's a few basic beliefs that everybody's familiar with. But aside from that, it's just, it goes...
Yeah, I mean, I see that even you see that in Christianity, right? Like, let's be honest, because you'll talk to Christians and they say, "Oh, Jesus to me is this," and those of us who are like sticklers, you could say, sure. Right? Like the annoying folks would say, "Well, it doesn't matter what Jesus means to you per se. Right. It's like, especially if that's in contradiction with what the text says." Correct. And I've seen a lot more effort by Christians who study Islam, bringing this to the forefront of the conversation, like. Well, it doesn't matter what your culture taught you about Islam. Right. What does Islam teach? What does your primary sources teach? What does the Quran teach? Do you live according to that?
So there's 2 misconceptions that I've seen specifically from a Western perspective, Artur. And the misconceptions are that the first one is that Islam is a peaceful, loving religion. And the second misconception is that all Muslims are terrorists. So we have kind of this feeling, especially in the South where I'm from, you go talk to some redneck, like how I grew up, and all those Muslims are terrorists, right? And then, but then you hear on the media, Islam is peace and love. And the absolute opposite is the true. Most Muslims are not terrorists, and Islam is not a peaceful religion.
Switch sides.
That's the actual truth to it. And so what we did in our church in Turkey, it seemed probably odd to some people, but we actually, in our library, like your library, that I've seen you've read your books and moved on.
Yeah, I ate them. When John sees the angel and takes the scroll and stuff. So I ate my books. That's how I consume them.
So what we did on our library is I had to hunt down. It took me probably 3 months to find the 3 most accepted Sunni hadith in Turkey. Now, and I'm talking about Istanbul, the city of 20 million people. It's the academic center. It's the cultural center. Wow. I had to literally hunt down on people's doors and say, do you have a set of hadith? You can't go to a Muslim bookstore and find full sets of the hadith. Wow. Now, the reason I had the entire sets, I had I had Sahih Bukhari, I had Sahih Muslim, I had Abu Dawud, I had other hadiths. But the reason I did that, and we had about 7 or 8 different translations of the Quran into Turkish. The reason we did that is we would have Muslims coming in to talk about Christianity, and they wanted to debate or talk about different things. And I didn't want to talk about culture or their perspective. I said, let's go back to your primary source books and let's actually see what it says. So we would open up Bukhari or all these different things. It was the first time they'd ever seen a set of hadith in their life. They look at it and they'd be shocked. They say, this can't be true. This can't be Islam. Like when it says in Bukhari, or the other ones that Muhammad married a girl named Aisha when she was 6 years old, and when she was 9 years old, consummated the marriage. They just couldn't believe that could be in their religion, and that their prophet would have done something like that when he's supposed to be the most perfect of examples. So I would have these things. And the reason I did that is, the subject of our time here is about the Muslim mindset. Mm-hmm. The Ministry of Religion in Turkey does a very deceptive thing, and I think they do it on purpose because they know, those that are in the know, that are the muftis and things like that, the religious leaders. Yeah. What they do is they have if you go to a bookstore in Turkey today, you can find the hadiths, but you find what they selected for you to read.
So it's a selected reading.
Yes. So, like, if you're a normal Turkish Muslim or Kurdish Muslim, you read Turkish, and you're like, hey, I'd like to know what my religion teaches me. Well, you go to the bookstore. 101 hadiths. Or 1001 hadiths.
So they don't really... Yeah,
so they're not getting the full, like, what does it say about jihad? About holy war? What does it say about sex slaves? Oh, they're not reading those hadiths. They're not reading those 1001 hadiths. They're reading the hadiths that are weak hadiths, like heaven is at the feet of the mother. So they're thinking, oh, look how great Islam is. Muhammad said that heaven is the feet of the mother, except for that's a weak hadith, and nobody really accepts that as a real true saying of Muhammad. Wow. And first off, I don't believe that the hadiths are actually accurate anyway. That's another story. But for a Muslim, they are. So that's one of the things is there's just a lot of deception, and there's a lot of lies that is inherent in the Muslim culture because it's inherent in the Quran and the Muslim God. I mean, one of his 99 names is Al-Makr, which means the deceiver. So, I mean, if you've got a God that one of his names is the deceiver, it's likely that you're going to have some issues within your culture and other things.
Well, Let me say this, and then we'll switch over to kind of the nature of the conversation. It always comes back to your view of God and then the view of the nature of God you have. For example, in Christianity, we believe God is immutable, unchanging.
Yeah, right.
And what we mean by this, scholars obviously are going to quibble over it, but when it really gets down to it, is that God is unchanging in his nature. Right? For example, if God is love, he's not going to change and become unloving and become hateful and evil overnight, right? Or at his whim. Where in Islam, that's not the case. The Islamic God, okay, and again, here we want to conceptualize, right? For me, Allah just means God, like Astavat means God in Armenian. Even though it has connotations and meanings, and I think we can redeem that. That's my personal opinion. We can change what we mean by Allah, and not everyone is in agreement with that. The concept is that he can come up with rules, moral rules. He can change his moral rules, right? So in Islam, Allah could say, "This is a sin. This is haram. Don't do it."
That's right.
2 days later, give you a new revelation and say, "It's okay now, guys. You can do it."
Right. You remember the story of Salman Rushdie and the satanic verses. So even though the book he wrote really had nothing to do with that, but what it did is it brought to light the fact that Muhammad at one point in history, when he was speaking to the Meccans, he allowed them to worship their god Allah, Uzza, and so forth. And then another revelation comes in and says, "Oh no, that was wrong. That was actually that was interpolated by Satan." And then there's the issue with the Nasik wa Mansuk, which is the law of abrogation, which is found in Surah 2106, where it talks about that God can change things if he wants.
Hey.
And it's like, well, to what? I mean, what is this?
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Again, just I want to encourage everyone, especially if a Muslim's going to watch this, know that your theology is the reason why you have the view you do. Like, you have, well, you might not even believe this as a Muslim.
That's
you might not actually think that God changes, right? He changes his mind at a whim in reality. That would mean you go back and look at your Islamic sources, you look at what your theology explains. You actually, without knowing, might be more in agreement with the Christian conception of God than the Islamic one, because in reality, the Islamic one is that God changes and can do whatever he wants to do.
I have an illustration for this that's really helpful. So one of the most common symbols for a Muslim and on flags and so forth is a crescent moon. You see that on the Turkish flag, Algerian flag, so forth. And what I found is that it's a really good example to represent what Islam is, or if a truth could be found even in the Quran, if there's something that could be truthful there, where does it originate from? So we all know that the moon is not a source of light. It doesn't bring forth light. It doesn't give light. It reflects the light from the sun. And if you see a crescent moon, you're talking 3% reflection, maybe 12% reflection of the actual sun, where the light is actually sourced from and coming from. And so as you're reading the Quran or you're reading some Islamic sources, you say, well, that looks, there's the guy named Moses mentioned there, and there's an Isa guy, and that there's some, and look, that looks pretty good. Well, there's some reasons that you're going to find that. Any truth, I would say, that's found in Islam, or anything that you would say looks similar to Christianity, well, it was already sourced in the Son, in Jesus Christ, in his word, and it's just a reflection of that, but it's not the full reflection. If you really want to find out what the truth is, who God truly is he a personal, relational, loving God that actually does love you so much that he would save you? You can't save yourself, he's going to save you. Then where does that come from? Well, you learn that from the Bible. I mean, the 66 books that he's given us. And so anyway, I like to give that as an illustration.
That's a good analogy. I like that. I like that. Okay, people are talking about the origination of the Allah and all that stuff.
Nice.
There's a lot of content out there about this stuff, by the way, guys. And I encourage you guys to go watch all the individuals that you probably already do watch. But David Wood, for me, is a good resource. But even some of the, like Jay Smith's good. I really enjoy Jay Smith's stuff, and Al Fadi is good, right? But again, most of the conversation here is being had with Sunni Arab Muslims.
Yes, correct.
Of a certain sort, maybe even of a Western sort, right? These are Muslims in America who are defending. There's Muslims in England.
Sure.
There's all this internet controversy over YouTube with some of these British Muslims and stuff like that. But you lived in Turkey.
Yeah.
And let's move away from Istanbul.
Sure.
Okay, because that's a big city.
Sure.
Big cities, capitals. We even in America, right? Like LA is a completely different context than Arkansas.
Sure.
And so let's talk about folk religion, because even in Armenia, I'll give you a perfect example. And this is throughout this Middle East, Eastern kind of region. You get even out of the village, right? You go into Armenian homes and stuff. What do you see? You see that blue eye hanging in people's cars. You know, you sit in a taxi in Yerevan. It's got that blue eye, and then the picture of Jesus, and then a cross, and then Mary, and you're like, what is going on here, man? It's like this pantheon, and it's definitely not Christian. Yeah. Because why is this guy who claims to be a Christian, clearly cross, this got this eye hanging here? Well, it's because of folk religion, okay? And so tell me about Islam in kind of rural villages, the mindset of people. Are they more religious? Are they less religious? What does that look like?
So there was a study that was done in Turkey, and this was back in 2012, so it's an 8-year-old study, but this is reflective of the mindset in Turkey. It's changed a bit, but generally has stayed the same. There was a study done by one of the universities in Turkey, in Istanbul, and they did a survey with 20,000 Turkish Kurdish Muslims. And they found that out of that group of Muslims, it was something like maybe 10% had actually read the Quran. And then it was even a lower percentage of actually read it in Turkish where they could understand what they read. And there was even a lower percentage for how many have actually read the Hadith. So when it comes to like even what we would say is Orthodox Islam or proper Islam, which we're talking about Sunni or Shia Islam, sourced in primary sources, trying to do things according to what the Hadith or the Quran says, that's what they call proper Islam. But really, in my perspective, all Islam is folk Islam. But to get back to this point, though, is what happens is because of their belief that God is distant, and because he doesn't come and interact with you, you have to find some other way to solve your problem. So they have these beliefs in all over the world. This is not just in the Muslim world, but you mentioned the evil eye. The evil eye could be done not on purpose to you. It could also be done to you intentionally, or to something that you love, something that you own. It could be an object, a person, a place, a thing, animal, doesn't matter. But there is I would say, a proper Islamic way to deal with those things, but it's still folk Islam. You're still doing a ritual to try to manipulate your world around you to solve the problem. I've talked with sheikhs about this. I've talked with hojas. These are people that are the shamans. And I've said, how do you guys deal with these problems? And they said, well, according to the Quran, you got to memorize this Quran in verse in Arabic. You lay on your left side 3 times. You repeat this many times. And if you do this ritual, then the evil eye and the effects of it will go away. Well, what did you just do here? The person doesn't even speak Arabic. They speak Turkish. They don't even know what you're talking about. You could be cursing and they have no idea what you're talking about. And then you do this ritual, and then this evil eye idea will go away. Well, the other ways that they deal with that is by hanging a blue eye bead, or they might have some kind of a triangle tattoo to protect them from some kind of evil eye. Sometimes they actually, this is the Arab world, but they tattoo their lips, and they all do all kinds of things. I could go into details, but what's important about this, and there's several categories. I mean, they're always afraid of demons, the boogeyman, I call it. It's the black one that oppresses them, that comes at night. So there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of these. That's the things that they talk about. They're not talking about, did you do the namaz or salat? Did you do your prayers today? And what do you think about? They're not talking about these deep intellectual, let's talk about the historicity of the Quran and how it came to be canon. They talk about the Bible, and they say it's been changed and corrupted, but that's as far as it goes. They'll never talk about like the history of the canonization of the scriptures. They won't even believe you if you've talked about it, because their minds are in a completely different place. They're not thinking about critical thinking, research. What they're thinking about is, every night I've got this demon that comes to me, and I don't know how to deal with it. So that's the things that usually in the Muslim world that we really were dealing with on a regular basis is their fear of the effects of the evil eye, the fear of a demon coming to them, or they're saying, I think my neighbor cursed me. What do I do about it? Well, thankfully, the Bible has answers for all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, see, here's the thing is because most of the people watching this are in the West, right? Like in America and or in England, it's English-speaking world. When they come across Muslims, whether they're Arab, whether they're Turks or Iranians or whatever like that, there's kind of a danger with watching this kind of content, right, on Islam. And again, I consume. It's because I enjoy it. By the way, I enjoy it. One day I'll share my story and why I enjoy Islam so much. But there's a danger of just approaching them and then kind of reading off a script.
Yes.
Because it could be the case that, listen, this individual, they're in the West, say they're in LA. They know nothing about their religion. Yeah. Everything they know about their religion is given to them about their parents. And, you know, say their parents migrate to the United States. Their parents don't know anything about Islam because their parents believe something, you know, their grandparents told them, and you do this and you do that. And then you show up, right? Like packed. Hadith, He didn't know what you're talking about.
That's right.
So what's the best way you can approach this situation? What's the best way you approached it in a village that, you know, you're talking to this village guy and...
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, you know, in the Muslim world, if you learn their language, first off, I mean, it's very simple things. But you have to remember, I'm just going to be honest, there's the education level in most Muslim countries is very low. The literacy rate is very low. There's been many studies I could, you know, point to show this. And because of that, I mean, you can't even have a conversation about like when Muhammad was born, when he died, and how does that relate with Jesus in the timeline? They don't even know timelines, proper timelines. What is before Christ? What is after Christ? So if you're talking to a Muslim, they'll say, well, of course the Bible was changed and corrupted. I mean, that was way long after Muhammad. And then you're looking at them, and first off, you do want to laugh like that, but you have to realize it's not their fault. They don't know. They were never taught. They never studied. So you have to have a lot of patience with a lot of these people. I'm talking about in the villages. I mean, this is not just in villages. This is representative of a lot of people in the Muslim world. So when I tell them when Muhammad was born in, say, 570 AD, they're like, what's AD? What do you mean 570? And then I'm like, well, Jesus was born around, you know, right at the Anno Domini at this time. And I explained, they're like, well, what's that? And then so like I find myself sometimes having to have an hour discussion about history and time before I can even explain to them when Jesus came to this earth, when he incarnated, and then what he did and what he taught, when his apostles taught, how the Bible came together. I mean, it just takes so much time if I wanted to do that. But again, I don't always want to have to get into all of those things. So there are what I would call felt needs that these people have. And so, you know, I'm talking to them, that you get to know them. You might find out that they've had disturbing dreams their entire life, and it's been about one subject. Or you might find out that they feel like they've been cursed. Well, what's amazing is that the Bible, I mean, you can go to passages like Numbers 23:23 is one of my go-to passages for a Muslim. It's the John 3:16 for a folk Muslim. And it says in that passage that there is no curse that can harm Jacob. There's no divination that can have any effect on Israel. If you are in Jesus Christ, if you're a true believer, it says that Jesus has taken the curse upon himself in Galatians chapter 3, and he's become a curse. I mean, we're not cursed people. In Christ we're blessed. So I say there's a way that you don't have to fear curses, the evil eye, none of these things. The Bible talks about this, but you have to turn to Christ.
Yeah.
And then we talk about those things. So there's just many felt needs depending on the subject. Okay. I can give you many examples.
It's amazing because experience, which is something that I've probably become more of a what's the word I'm looking for here? Fan. Let's say, right? That's not the word I was looking for, but what's the one we'll use? Of experiences. Now, in the sense that they're valid, man.
Yes, they are.
Like you can't. There's this fear amongst Americans and Westerners. Experience. You know, you gotta like listen, my experience is pretty good. Okay, it could be false. That's cool. I'm open to it being false. Mm-hmm. But if I'm experiencing it and he's experiencing it and she's experiencing it and 1,000 other people are experiencing it, there's probably something going on there.
Right.
Right. And so the encouragement to say, hey, let me pray for you.
Yes.
Because in the missions world, right, they call this power encounters, power struggles, right? Is that it could be the case that the Holy Spirit just does all your job for you. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like this guy's got this disturbing dream. You pray for him, calls you the day after and says, for the first time in the past 15 years, I slept fine. What did you do? Now there's a conversation that they're open to and all that. Let's talk about something that is close to my heart in a sense, because there's a lot of conversations happening in Turkey right now, and because of the Armenian Auxiliary issue and all that stuff. Yeah. Let's talk about the nationalistic vibe, right, that Turkish Islam has. That maybe, and I'm not sure, and you know this much better than I do. Do Arab countries have a similar kind of nationalistic Islam? And how is that some kind of, if it is, how is it related to the Ottoman Empire as the caliphate of the Islamic kind of world?
Well, there's a lot there. Let me try to make it simple. I'm not an expert in Arab studies. Sure. That's an actual study field of study. And my sister is actually, she was in that field. She lives in Jordan, speaks Arabic, and we talk about a lot of these issues, actually. And there is a very ethnic pride, which is not a bad thing, to be proud of your background, your ancestry. That's fine. But I think for Arabs, they do talk about, it's not a nationalistic in the sense of it's one country. It's the Arabs say, we're descendants from Muhammad, the Arab people. It's an ethnic issue, not necessarily a country issue. And they're very proud of their language, their culture, that's where Islam came from, except for the fact that there were Christian Arabs long before there was Muslim Arabs. And so my Christian Arab friends that might be watching this, I recognize that. And the Christian Arabs were there long before the Muslim Arabs ever had a thought. So I do want to mention that. But when it comes with Turks, there is this, even I would say, this extra pride. So it's interesting when you talk to a Turk, they'll say there's only two countries in the world. This is what they say, that have never been colonized, and they say it's Thailand and Turkey. And so what they mean by that when they're saying that is they're saying, look, nobody can conquer us. Nobody can do anything to take us over. Not only that, we were the leader of the caliphate for all of these years, and which is really interesting because there's supposed to be a secular republic right now. And since Ataturk 1923 disbanded the caliphate, all of those things, they shouldn't even be thinking about those things. But what I've seen now in Turkey is this trend to go back to the caliphate, even among younger people too. So there's this group of people, these atheistic Turkish background people. I call them the atheist background people. So they have this group, and they're moving away from Islam because they don't like it. They study it. They're getting into details about it and rejecting it. But then you have this other resurgence of, we need to go back to the golden days, the glory days of Islam. And I've had conversations with 15-year-olds saying, women should be walking on separate sides of the streets than men. We shouldn't be interacting with each other. They've said that, we need to go back to the Ottoman times when we brought peace to the entire world. Oh, Lord. That's what they're taught. We brought peace to the world. We brought peace to Bulgaria, to Armenia, to Greece. Yeah. And they believe that.
Ask us that, right?
Right. And that's the thing about the subject here is that with the Muslim mind in Turkey, there's just a lot of deception and false teaching on every subject. I mean, from religion, if you ask a Turk or Kurd, what is Christianity? I mean, they have no idea. They're going to give you opposite answer to what the truth is about Christianity, the church, a Christian, the Bible, doctrine of God. They've been taught a completely different idea than what the actual primary sources of the Bible teach. Yeah. When it comes to their own history, I was just mentioning to you too, I just want viewers to know this, if there's any Turks listening, that there was Turkish Christians long before there was Muslim Christians. In part of my doctoral research, I studied Timothy the First, the patriarch out of Baghdad. This man was traveling all over the Turkic world, and I've read his documents. He says the Turks are saying, "Holy, holy, holy, Lord God Almighty." And this was back in the 700s. We're talking about 8th century. He's writing this. And then you get to the very first Turkish Catholicos, Catholicus, I think we say in English, Catholicus. And he was the Turkish Catholicus out of Turkmenistan. His center for his Catholicus was in a city called Merv. You can look on the map, and his name was Rabban Sauma, and he was own goat Turk. He was a Turkish-born guy, and he even traveled through to France. He gave communion to the King of England in France at that time. This was in the 1200s. So it was recorded in history, and there's a lot of archaeological discoveries about this. But these guys, they had their hymns, they were worshiping, and they were Turkish. And it says in some accounts there's hundreds of thousands, some accounts millions of Turkish Christians. So that is not taught in any Turkish curriculum in Turkey. What they teach is we were animist, we were pagans, and then we become Muslims. Well, when did they become Muslims? Well, Timur, or Tamerlane, came in and wiped out all of the Turkish Christians, and about 100 years after that man, Rabban Sauma, was the Catholicus. Tamerlane came on the scene and wiped them all out. And then you have Islam. So they don't even know this stuff.
Yeah, I've had very similar conversations with Persians, with Iranians.
Yeah.
And I, because one of the things I realized, I was having a conversation with some friends who are Iranian, and I realized that they were just down, right? Like discouraged culturally. And they're like, oh man, we look at Armenia and Christianity. And then I stopped them and I said, you do realize that you guys have a very old Christian heritage. Yeah. When Christianity came to Armenia, it was there for you too. Iranians were becoming believers. That's right. And then there was Iranian Jews that would have been becoming Christians as well, left from the Babylonian kind of Persian Empire days and all that. But I said it's when Islam came in and wiped these people out that there's this really washed, I don't want to say whitewashed, it's washed history. We've always been this. That is not true.
It's not true.
Christianity has permeated, was in your culture, was doing great. Like Persians were sending out missionaries. Yes. These people, whether it's the Turkic people, and that goes beyond Turkey, because
of course,
so let's talk about
Turkic
that.
people. Yeah.
For those who don't know,
sure.
okay, so we're talking about Turkey as a country, and then you also mentioned Turkic people, and you mentioned Turkmenistan, right? So help.
So there's the Turkey people, the Turkic people. They actually originating from like southwestern China. Uyghur people would be known. That's really popular in the news today. That China has been having these education camps with the Uyghur Muslims. Wow. Well, they're Turkic people. I can actually understand a lot of what they say in their language because it's a similar language, Turkic language. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. You talk about other Turkic, Azerbaijan, the Azeri people. There is also around 25 million. Tajiki. Tajikistan they have more of a background with the Persians.
Okay.
Than some of the Turks. But there's a lot of Turkic people groups, and when it comes back to this nationalism in Turkey, there's been this pan-Turkic idea, and they've talked about this often, that they're trying to unite all of the Turkic-speaking countries based on language, ethnicity, and religion together to unify. And I really see this. I don't want to get into politics, and I don't want to. Yeah, because I can't predict anything. That's not my field. But it just seems that what I've seen in Turkey over 15 years is this trend to connect everything together, to bring back an actual Islamic caliphate, an Islamic state.
Yeah. So I don't want to talk about politics, but I know because I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. The sad reality is we have to. Yeah. Because Islam, right, is a political religion.
It is military, political, financial, economic, everything.
You can't,
way of life,
right? It is a way of life. I mean, so you have to talk about it, right? Because it's not like Muhammad sat there and said, let's not deal with politics.
No, that's right. He said, go and conquer the entire world with a sword until they submit.
And well, Islam has that as its objection,
right.
and it's some form of a submission, whether it's willing or whether it's not.
Right.
I want to go back to this dealing with Turks within a Western context who still have the mindset of Islam. They might not be practicing Islam, or they might go into a place where some Turks I've met who've become Christians ever since, they became more Islamic in the West. Because that was the thing that kind of was keeping their identity. Dealing with them and evangelizing and having these apologetic conversations, whether it's online on Facebook and stuff, which I wouldn't recommend having those conversations on Facebook. But sitting down and talking to them and then trying to figure out what's going on. What is going on? Because again, this person is not an Arab. They don't think like an Arab. This person is a Muslim, but is a certain sort of Muslim. So
let me give you one group of Muslims in Turkey that originated out of Turkey that I think has the most influence in the world when it comes to influencing the world and their brand of Islam are the Nurju people, the followers of Said Nursi. I also grouped them together with a man named Fethullah Gulen, and they call him the Gulenist movement, the Hizmet movement, the kind of hand in hand. They have very similar teachings, Said Nursi and Fethullah Gulen. And what's important about this...
These are authentically Turkish.
Turkish, yes. So, like, for example, Said Nursi was born in Bitlis in like 1880s or something like that. And Fethullah Gulen was born in Erzurum in around 1941. And so these people are from Turkey. Actually, I think both of them are ethnically Kurdish, to be honest. It's kind of interesting. And it's actually also interesting because we also have another really, I wouldn't say famous guy from Turkey, but he started this Quran only movement, and he's also Kurdish. His name's Edip Yüksel, and he actually lives in Tucson, Arizona. Fethullah Gulen lives in Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania, out of all places. So these guys are exiled out of their country because of their beliefs, but they have a huge following. I'll give you an example. There's around 164 charter schools that Fethullah Gulen started in the United States alone, and they have their organizations all over. And one of the things that's interesting about these guys is, as a Christian, is they say they're open to religious dialogue. So if you talk to a normal Arab or maybe a Turk that is not a Gulenist or Nurju Muslim, they're going to fight with you on everything. There's going to be a battle. It's okay. It's fun. It's good to do that. They want to do that. But with these guys, they'll sit there and listen. I've interacted with these guys. I've been in their meetings for years and years, and they actually invite me to come and tell me the Christian perspective on Jesus. So I get to sit for 2 hours and preach with my Bible open to a group of Nurjus. Well, it's not that they're becoming Christians, but they're open to listen. That was what their leaders told them. We need to have religious dialogue. So I would say in a positive sense, that's really good to have. And they have these religious dialogue conferences all over the United States and all over the world. And you will find more of these in the West than ever before, because in 2016, in July, there was an attempted military coup in Turkey. And Tayyip Erdogan basically had blamed the Gulenists for this, saying Fethullah Gulen is trying to take over our country and all of these things. And because of that, they're now exiled all over the place. And when I go back and visit the United States, I find them everywhere. And they actually tell me why they're here. And so if you're interacting with Turks, specifically in the last 5 or 6 years, in the West, if you're in Germany or France, wherever you're listening, you will find that these people are coming from this background. They were exiled. They can't return, because if they do, they're going to be implicated with this attempted military coup. But they're open to religious dialogue, friendship. All of those things are there. They have a lot of differences. I wrote a chapter of a book. It's now I have it with me. I can show you about the Fethullah Gulenist movement. But to help people know how to reach them, because they are different, because of their openness, and that they are open to private interpretations of religious matters. So they don't just listen to just one thing. They're kind of more open to different ideas, and they have a higher education, because they value reading, study, and education. So it's not like you're dealing with a typical village Turk or Kurd. Yeah. They really want to get into study and understand things more than a typical person would.
would they, in the larger Islamic world, would these movements be seen as cults?
No, they're well respected. They're all over Africa. They're all over the world. This is what I'm saying. I think this movement, the Gulenist movement, the Nurju movement, has the most influence out of any other group.
Okay, the reason why I asked, right? Because I'm thinking Nabil Qureshi and the kind of stuff Nabil Qureshi got over being Ahmadi.
Right.
And it's an easy way to get rid of a conversation by some of these other guys, right?
Oh, yeah,
like,
sure.
Well, yeah, those guys are cults. They don't believe this stuff.
So what's interesting about these guys is that they do fully accept the Hadith. They're mostly Sunni, Hadith and the Quran. But they Said Nursi wrote volumes of commentaries, and how they draw people into their group is they use really weird language in Turkish. So like we would in Turkish, there's a plain way to say something. And then they use like old Ottoman words, so it sounds like really educated, intellectual. Like there's some Gnostic, interesting knowledge that they know that they draw you into. And they're like, oh, well, how do I know the way? How do I know the path? And then they say, well, you have to do these 3 things. And they use interesting Turkish vocabulary that nobody understands in Turkey. And then you come to their meetings, and then you find out, oh, he's just talking about you submit to Muhammad. Okay.
Yeah.
But no, they're not looked at as a fringe group in their beliefs at all. But the one thing I would say that I feel there's a danger is that they have the same Islamic goals of bringing Sharia law into the entire world. They just want to do it through democracy. So let's get enough Muslims in, let's get enough votes in, let's get enough change in society so we can somehow slowly bring Islam. So that's one of their key teachings.
Well, listen, that's the danger and the gift of living in a free society, right? I mean, if people aren't on their if people aren't like up on their game and involved and knowing what's going on, then you're gonna give away stuff. That's just the reality. I mean, we see this happening in the United States, where it's like you sit there and say, "Well, how did so and so get into power?" You know, you're gonna get my political opinions here. I was watching Cortez. What's her name? Cortez. She was talking about how to save the post office yesterday. It was just like the stupidest thing I've ever watched. Sorry, but this is so. She's like, I have a way. She's like, I got an idea, and she seems very excited about it, about saving the post office. And she said, "How about we come up with a nationwide progressive pen pal program, and we all buy stamps?" And I'm like, people have phones, man. They have email. Like they get it in an instant. Like you're telling people to go back and sit there and write stuff, and it immediately. I mean, this is probably my own fears. It immediately started making me think about how communism just destroys everything, and tells you, "Oh, your phone? That's a great product. Here's a pen and a paper. Let's get rid of your phone."
That's a good point.
But, right? Like it's like you see it all over in Armenia, right? Sure. It's like you see this building and you go, what were they thinking? Like, why would you build this monstrous thing, right? When all across the world there's these beautiful things being built at the same period of time, and you go, oh yeah, because communists love copy paste. It's just like bam, bam, and doing stuff in really funny ways. But yeah, that's a different subject that we can talk about, how Christians should respond to this. It's just hilarious. Let's do postcards.
But I wanted to mention one thing to go back about Muslims when they move to the West. I would say there's a difference between first generation, second, and third generation. And I've seen this, and Nabil Qureshi is a great example. Here's somebody where his father immigrated first to Scotland, I think, and then to the United States, from I remember correctly. And then, he just kind of had the mindset of, not really critically questioning religion, what you believe, and getting into it. But here you have Nabil that is now, he studied medicine and he's in critical thinking. He's discovering that in the West. If he would have stayed in Pakistan, he would have never had that mind. And I really believe that the skills for critical thinking in the Western education system, that's biblically based and founded. And so what I find is that you have two choices when a Muslim immigrates to the West or into Western education. And the two choices that they have is this. One, they have new skills and tools to interpret, do hermeneutics for their religion, which they've never done before. They were never allowed to do that. You listen to the imam, you listen to the teacher, and you just blindly believe it. In fact, you don't even study context and history and language. They don't do that. That's not normally taught. So now they're introduced to all these new tools, which comes from Christianity. That's where the modern education system comes from. Is from Amos Comenius, I believe. He's the one that started it back in whatever 1500s probably. But anyway, so what happens is that they're introduced to this way of thinking that is new. And so what happens is they begin to either critically look at and say, look, my soul doesn't match with this. I don't like Muhammad as a prophet. Look at these things that he's done. And when their soul and their being is, what they're doing is they're reflecting the true biblical God that they know is true. It says that in Romans chapter 1, starting in verse 18 and following, that everybody knows the true God. And we're created in his image. And so something doesn't resonate when they read all of these horrible things. And they're like, okay, so maybe this can't be true. And they will reject it, and then they step to Christ. And so they can become an atheist or an amazing apologist like Nabil Qureshi. Or they can take the third choice, which would be, let's study this. I want to now follow the historical Muhammad from the Hadith and the Surah and all of these things, and they become a terrorist.
Extremists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A real Muslim, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. Someone said just like Iranian people. Yeah. Yes, in a certain sense. Again, because I say this because I'm a Protestant, Armenian Protestant, and I get that. I really do, because there's all this cultural stuff that comes with your religious identity, right? Like when I speak to people and they just assume I'm apostolic because I'm Armenian, right. It's hilarious. That's happened with Armenians and that's happened with non-Armenians. We're just like, they see me like talking about, and they just assume I'm apostolic. I've had professors assume I'm apostolic, and I was like, oh no, I don't believe that stuff. I'm Protestant. I'm more in line with what you're saying, man. And so there's a religion, right, carries culture as well.
Yes.
Americans need to realize this. There's and especially Americans that deal in missions. So a lot of them who aren't well trained, who have a great heart, who want to go around the world and do mission, or they do these short-term mission stuff and all that. They don't realize how much culture they're carrying with them. They don't realize how much of America they're carrying with them, rather than, well, how can we contextualize, right, what your culture and what the Bible teaches. Yeah. And even this understanding of like the biblical culture is very difficult to even talk about that, because the biblical culture is within the ancient Near Eastern culture. You see you see that everywhere. I've been reading through Old Testament books like First, Second Kings and stuff like that, and it is no surprise to me that the Israelites assimilated and started worshiping these deities, and then they're also worshiping Yahweh at the same time. And for us, we're looking at this and saying, why would you do that, right? And here's monotheism and all this stuff. Well, it's because you don't understand the cultural pressures. You don't understand that these villages and Baal prophets coming along and saying, oh, you worship Yahweh? That's okay, right? You can keep worshiping Yahweh and Baal, because they're in the pantheon, right? Like, you can see that happening, and this hasn't stopped. For people who think this was the mindset and the way things that were done in the ancient world, don't understand the modern world, nor do they understand the ancient world, okay? It didn't stop like Christianity happened and bam, this stuff stopped, or oh yeah, but we're enlightened and the Enlightenment happened, and no. People around the world still think like this, still function like this. That is why you will see, for example, this evil eye, this blue eye, hanging in Muslim homes, in Christian homes, like you see it, right? It's permeated into culture. It's given, redefined, and given even Christian and Muslim meaning and stuff like that. So if you really want to engage these people, you have to engage their cultures. You have to engage what's going on.
I just want to mention this last thing, is that the Bible should, as a Christian, should be our source of authority for faith and practice. And so the Bible does speak about these things, but if you go to a Western seminary or Bible college, they're not talking about, okay, we're going to do a discipleship on people that believe in the evil eye or curses that have been cast on them. What you're going to have to do is study the scriptures for yourself, see what the Bible teaches, and apply it to that situation, to those people that you're ministering with. Yeah. So it's extra study, it's extra work, but it will pay off. One story, there's a Turkish pastor, a really good friend of mine, and his wife. I had a discussion about this subject. And so the Turkish man, he was a Muslim, the wife was a Muslim. Now not only are they Christians, they're pastoring a church. And for those viewers listening, there are actually 172 new Protestant churches in Turkey since 1965. And there's around 7,000 new Christians that are coming from a Muslim background to a Christian background. So there's some good things happening, even though there's politics and all this other things. God is still saving people because he is a merciful God. So when I was talking to this woman about the evil eye, specifically, she said to me, she's like, my son, when he was about 6 years old, began to get white spots on his hand and his body. It was some kind of a skin disease. We took him to a doctor. We didn't know what to do with it. And my family was furious with me because we didn't put an evil eye bead on him to protect him. It was our fault that he was sick. Oh. And she said the culture was still so in my heart that I actually began to believe them.
Oh, wow.
And thinking, is it my fault? Because I didn't put that, did this really happen? I mean, the entire community is putting this pressure on them.
That's right. Oh, yeah.
So she said the Christians in the church said this. They're like, look, we can't go to a Hoja. We can't go to a Muslim shaman because we know that's bad. But why don't we do this? Let's do the same ritual that a Muslim shaman would do, but in a Christian way. So what we'll do is we'll instead of melting or taking the Quranic Arabic words and dissolving the ink into a glass, stirring it and having them drink it, let's get the Bible, let's get the words from the Bible, and we'll do the same ritual. And she said, I actually thought about doing it. She's like, maybe this is the way to do it. And this disease went on for 2 years with this woman, and her and her husband, for this poor kid, he's crying.
Christians at this point.
They're pastoring. And so they said, one night, again, my husband and I, we just prayed, God, please deliver our son. We don't know what to do. Please, we're only looking to you for, for his salvation, for his health, all of these things. The next morning, he came running in saying, Mom, I'm dead. I'm healed. I'm completely healed. And she realized that God was just really testing her faith and strengthening her faith to trust him alone and not some ritual, not some amulet. Yeah. I have about 100 stories I could tell like that. But the reason I want to say that is this is why discipleship is important from somebody from a Muslim background, because they have all of these ingrained cultural things, absolutely. And we have to know how to apply the Bible to each one of them.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I've had similar situations where, whether personally, I've removed, the horseshoes and I've removed the eye and all that stuff and gotten trashed for it, man. Like, oh man, because I was like throwing trash and it was, This is when you have zeal. Like I was a new Christian, so I went around the house and purged it.
I bet your parents did
that. And my parents were like, "What is this guy doing?" And it's strange. And I want people to understand the context here, right, guys? Like, so here I am, 18 years old. I start following Jesus. My parents think they're Christians.
Sure.
But everybody around me thinks they're Christians, and here I am saying, "Oh, I'm a Christian," and they're like, oh, "What's wrong with you?" Right? And then I go around the house purging these evil stuff, and they're like, "Why are you doing this?" And I say, "Well, because the Bible teaches against it." And for them, it's like, "Well, you think you know more than the priests? You think you know more than these religious leaders? Right. None of them are telling us to purge all this stuff." And I'm like, "Yeah, but here's what the Bible is saying about this stuff." And then you immediately get this tension in the house. And that's a lot of pressure, man. Because now you have tension with your family. Now you got tension with your friends. Yeah. And your friends are like, "Hey, bro, what happened to that thing that, we gave you? You had to hang it in your car." And you're like, "I threw it in the trash." Yeah. And now they're offended, right? So I want people to understand it's not as easy as just saying, "Well, you became a Christian, here's what happens." That's right. And again, it goes back to the discipleship thing where it's like, come on, let's help you through it, and you might lose friends in the process of this, and here I am with you, because having, whether it's the Turkish mindset, right? Whatever, it's the Saudi mindset and all this stuff. There's so much culture in there. There's so much of your identity wrapped up in all of this stuff. And we have to be very careful when you're ripping these things away, not to rip away the person's culture.
Yeah, that's right.
Because Christianity is not telling you to rip away their culture. One of the things that a lot of Christians in the Middle East, a lot of Christians in those cultures get accused of is becoming Western, becoming American, becoming European or English or something like that. Like, oh, you're no longer Turkish, for example, right? Because you became a Christian.
That's right.
And these Turkish Christians are saying, no, man, I'm like more Turkish now.
Right, exactly. That's exactly.
Right.
You know, it's interesting. I have a lot of Azeri friends that are pastors in Azerbaijan. There's around 10,000 Azeri Christians in Azerbaijan right now. And when I talk to them about this subject, when they come to faith in Christ and they now do evangelism, they're preaching the Bible, they're accused of being a traitor, and they call them, you're an Armenian now.
You're Armenian.
So,
not the theological kind.
No, the ethnic kind.
That's right.
So all of our Azeri Christian friends living in Azerbaijan, they identify themselves, with Armenia. It's interesting. It is interesting. I'd say one more thing about this too. If you're an Armenian and you're watching, and you, one thing I found, I had really good relationships with the Armenian community in Turkey. I would pray with a priest. We had great times. True godly believer, but it wasn't his choice, but they had to do all of their liturgy in Armenian and the preaching in the Armenian language. Well, the problem is if you're a Turk or a Kurd and you want to hear the gospel or want to find out what a Christian believes and you go to an Armenian building, you can't hear it in your language. Yeah. And so he knew this is a problem. He would rather have been able to communicate with them in Turkish so they could hear it. But he would send them to our church because we were Turkish background or Kurdish background church. But I always thought that was sad because the Armenian, if it's based on your language, if you like the Greeks, it's based on the Greek Orthodox, it's around the language. How are you doing, apologetics and discipleship and sharing the gospel around the world if they have to learn your language?
And this is a recent development. One of the things I've realized, because of all the tensions, because of the genocide and all that stuff, because whether it's Greeks or Armenians or whomever, these people were actually speaking and preaching, and even there's Bibles that are in Armenian, but it's like Turco-Armenian.
That's true. Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen that one.
Right? Yes, it's like it's a strange language that no longer gets used. That's but it was a language that was used in Western Armenia, right, Eastern Turkey. That it was used, and missionaries went there, and they said, "Well, we want to put a Bible into these people's language, but it's neither Armenian nor Turkish. It's kind of like both." So it's very interesting. Yeah. Rafi, you made a comment here. Rafi said, "Arthur, I have the same issue." Bro, get in contact with me, okay? Send me a message somehow. Email me on Facebook. There's a bunch of ways. I would like to talk to you because I think there's right and wrong ways about going about how to do this as we interact with our family members who aren't believers. And I would say the same thing for anyone else. If you're a Turkish Christian who's watching this, get in contact with me, because I think that we will share a lot of cultural similarities enough that we can learn from each other and say, oh yeah, my parents think like that, but from the Muslim side, and my parents from this religious Christian.
That's right.
Okay. Let's talk about finish on this note, okay? Because it's very interesting. You said Turks. There's this idea of Turks becoming Christians. And then there's Turks who become atheists and then therefore become Christians after that. Because atheism does something to them. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so I will. One of my really close Turkish friends, I would say my closest Turkish friend, he's also a pastor, but he's also the #1 Turkish apologist in the world right now. His I'll just say his YouTube channel is Bahri Beytel. It's in the Turkish language. We only have one of his videos subtitled in English. And this man is viewed millions of times. He is posted on atheistic Turkish channels because they love how he talks and deconstructs Islam. Because they're like, yeah, this is what we've been saying too. There was a really famous guy named Turan Dursun that was kind of these voices to kind of critique Islam and point out these things. A long time ago, he was actually murdered for his views in Turkey, but atheists like to read him as well there. And so what they're doing is they're deconstructing Islam and they're studying it critically, and they realize this cannot be God. This is an angry God. This is a warring God. This is all of these things. And so they call themselves atheists, but they're really not atheists. They're just rejecting the Islamic God.
So when you push it, will they be like agnostic? Or like, well, I'm not sure. I think there is some kind of
they wouldn't be a hardcore atheist. No, absolutely
like a soft
not.
agnostic.
Yes.
Okay.
And a lot of them don't even want to spend the time into Christianity because they're like, we were, they're still just taught that those books were changed and corrupted.
They're still
all that
like
culture
Muslims.
is, they're still thinking like a Muslim, but atheist is Muslim. Just like the atheists in the West, they all think like Christians. They just don't acknowledge the Christian God.
That's true.
They steal from Christianity without acknowledging him. So anyway, so they're coming with their background. And so what's great is a lot of these people that are coming to Bahri's channel, they're realizing, wow, this guy, he's sharp. He knows how to deconstruct Islam. He sees the same thing we saw, but why is he a Christian? And so then they start questioning, can you please tell us more about Christian? Why did you choose this? Why is this different than Islam? Because, they're taught they're supposed to believe in the 4 right books, the Tawrat, Zabur, Injil, Quran, but then they don't ever read the Old and New Testament. They just, we believe it, but we don't read it.
They weasel out of it, right?
So he's challenging, you need to read these books, and this is what the God of Christianity is, and how the God of Christianity is not the God of Islam. And so I would say, and I've seen this over the years, the first step is this move away from Islam, more so, and then a step towards Christ when they truly encounter who he is, the message of the gospel, who the biblical God is. That's kind of a pattern I've seen.
It's very interesting for me, and I'm going to try to kind of, because I'm a philosopher and I like to think about this stuff. Okay, so I love epistemology. It's my favorite branch of philosophy. One of the things that we speak about in epistemology is a noetic structure, right? It's the sum total of all the beliefs that you have. If you can think about it like as a kind of round thing, right? And then there's beliefs we have that are very central to that. And then there's beliefs we have like that are on the, spectrum kind of on the outer side. So my belief, by the way, that vanilla ice cream is the best tasting ice cream. I actually believe that. I'm dead serious. Right?
Mint chocolate chip.
I can't stand mint chocolate. I worked at Baskin-Robbins for a number of years. Okay, so I have personal experience of tasting really nasty ice cream. I still think vanilla is the best.
That's cool.
Okay, people think it's because I'm a plain individual. Maybe so. But that's like not very central to my worldview, right? It's like if it changes. I fall down and hit my head and I wake up and I'm like, man, chocolate is the stuff, right? That's a possibility. It's a real possibility, right? And that could go out. But if Islam, or even if Christianity, right, is very central, and then someone moves, right, their kind of belief system is changing, and it gets rejected, right? Now they've just become more aware. They've become more open to alternate perspectives. And you go, well, why wouldn't this guy just become a Christian? Well, because it was like in their mind, right? In all sum total of stuff they believed, that's not even a possibility. But once that goes, then this is the case. It might actually be advantageous. I'm just like saying something that I might regret in the future. It might even be advantageous in a conversation with a Muslim to show them why Islam is wrong before this whole conversation about them becoming Christians.
No, it is. I agree. One of the things that I teach for apologetics and for discipleship is that we do need to critique their primary sources, whether there's internal contradictions or if there are things that we would say are immoral that in your practice, if you did them, like, for example, most Muslim women don't want to share their husbands with other women, or they don't want to be beaten.
That's a very good thing.
Right? Or, there's a number of things that you can look at and you could say, look, if you truly believe these primary sources, then what you're going to have to do to live them out, your life is going to look like this. Your experience is going to be very bad. So look at the primary source, see what it says, and see how that's going to affect your life. Do you want a Muslim man to treat you the way the Quran says you're to be treated?
This was very interesting. This came out in a conversation I was watching yesterday. David Wood's channel, he's had this Indian doctor on, medical doctor, Shoaib, I think. And they've been going back and forth. That guy's been given a lot of opportunity to preach Islam on David Wood's channel to his audience. A lot. And props to David Wood, okay? And then yesterday, him and Sam Shamoon were going out, and you guys know Sam's personality. and Sam called him out on it. He said would he want his mother, would his dad want his wife to be treated the way, if they were living during Muhammad's time, would he want his wife, his daughter, his mother to be treated the way Islamic primary sources say? And he didn't get an answer from him. Of course. And he's not going to get an answer from him.
I did a survey in Istanbul over a period of 2 years with hundreds of Muslim women, Turkish and Kurdish women. And what I would do is in the survey, I would ask them about their religion, what they believed, about their belief in the Quran, all of these things. Then I would ask them where I'm trying to get to, which was the 4 or 5 passages that talk about marriage in the Quran. And I would say, what do you think about this? Would you want to marry a man that did these things? Then I would go over scriptural, what the Bible says about marriage. And then I read those verses, not say I'm reading from the Bible, and say, what do you think about this? Would you want a man to follow these principles and marry that person? 100%, all of the Muslim women preferred to marry a Christian man without knowing it.
So that's a clever way, by the way. That's a clever way of getting this conversation started. I've used similar stuff with atheists. One of the things I do is I have done in the past is do a cognitive dissonance test.
Oh my gosh, I gotta hear this.
It's called the cognitive dissonance test, but I've actually made this up at a coffee shop, like on the spot in a conversation, because you just kind of get used to it. It's the same kind of questions you ask. And usually I'll use this with people who are preaching something. They're wearing a shirt that says, F racism or something like that. Like this one girl I got into conversation with, her laptop said F racism. And so I approached her and I said, hey, listen, can we have a quick conversation? And I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. I will tell you why I'm asking the questions afterwards. And she said, yeah. And so I asked her, her name, obviously, if she has any religious kind of background and stuff like that. And this individual said, no, I'm kind of like agnostic and stuff like that. I said, okay. And then I asked her a number of moral questions. For example, I asked her, do you think rape is wrong? And she said, well, yeah, of course, rape is always wrong. And I said, clearly you think racism is wrong. It's big on your laptop. She said, oh, yeah. I said, well, do you think homosexuality is wrong? She said, no. And I asked her a couple of other questions. And then I said, well, it seems like you have cognitive dissonance. And she was like, what is that? I asked, actually, one of the questions was, do you think abortion is wrong? And she said, no, it's not. And then I also asked her whether she thought morality, and this is the key kind of question, whether morality is relative or absolute. And she said, and listen, she was like, for me, it was all scripted because I knew exactly what she was going to say. She said relative. And I said, well, you have cognitive dissonance. She said, what is that? So, well, you think morality is relative, but you absolutely think racism and rape are wrong, but you think abortion, homosexuality are completely fine. And you're holding cognitive dissonance. You're holding 2 contradictory beliefs without even realizing it. And then the conversation that went from that was brilliant. Usually is. It's a really quick way of getting conversations going. So it's a cognitive dissonance test.
The scriptures, 2 Corinthians chapter 10, I think it's verses 4 and 5, says that we're to take every thought captive for Christ, and that's what you're doing, and that's what we're advocating here.
But it's a good way to start a conversation as well. Because I doubt she's thought about this. And then this is one of those situations where I won't forget. Partly because I found out she was a nursing student, and I found out that she was studying ethics. Wow. Like, she was studying for an ethics test, and I actually helped her out with some of the ethical theories as she was like studying utilitarianism and stuff like that. I was like, well, here's what it means. And again, it's God ordained. Someone asked here, where are those passages?
Which passages?
I guess the ones you mentioned about marriage and stuff
Nisa
like that.
4 chapter. So on Nisa in the Quran chapter 4. Starting, just read that chapter and you'll start seeing them.
Those are the marriage passages.
Yeah, those are some marriage passages in the Quran. There's also another passage that talks about if a woman and a man divorce, if they feel they are to be remarried, the woman first must marry another man, consummate that marriage with that man, divorce him, and then remarry her first husband. Now, I don't have the exact, I think it's maybe chapter 35. I'll look at it and we'll put it up and post it later. But that's a very clear Quranic passage about marriage and reconciliation. You can reconcile with your husband if you have sex with another man first. The Bible teaches the opposite of that. It says that, there's a lot of places like that.
Going back to that Bible, by the way, Antonik wrote, my uncle has one of those. When you read the words, so it's written in Armenian, but it's actually Turkish. So it's Armenian letters.
Yes, it's Armenian, but it's Turkish.
So
yes,
here's the interesting thing. But even the words in there, like a lot of the words aren't actually Armenian. They're from that region, right? I mean, there's a lot of words even in our Armenian language that are actually like Persian or Farsi or Turkish and stuff like that. But they're not Armenian. It's very interesting because you were saying Armenians having the awareness of reaching Turks, in Turkey and all this stuff. And these guys were thinking about that, right?
Yeah,
they are. They're reading in Armenian letters, but it's actually the Turkish language.
There was an actual movement before the Armenian genocide among Armenians to reach their Muslim neighbors.
Yeah.
And there were some that were quite effective. And this is in the 1800s they were doing this. There's a book called Abraham Hoja that's written. You can find it in PDF online. Abraham Hoja is I don't know how they spell it, but
I'll find it. I'll put it in the description box, by the way.
And they have that also in the Armenian language as well. We have that in English and in Armenian.
So, what have you written that people can have access to?
Yeah. So,
and how can they have access to it? If there's a way I can put it in the description box, I will.
So there's a book that came out, The Margins of Islam, a Ministry in Diverse Muslim Contexts. It was forwarded by David Garrison. This book right here. I have a chapter in here about the Gulen movement and the Nur Jews.
Okay.
And so you can find that on Amazon or something, things like that. I have some other little books that I've written specifically. I'm really interested in evangelism, so I have one specifically for Muslim women. It's The Messiah and Women. I have that on Amazon as well, but it's under Yakup Korkmaz. That's one of my pseudonyms for writing in Turkish that I used to use. So I love this because I really feel bad for women in the Muslim world, and so everything was dedicated for them in this book. And I realized even in the Turkish language we had no book that addressed anything for Muslim women. Everything is for a man, and it's weird because I'm a man writing about it, right? So that was kind of strange, but I felt the Lord called me to do that. This one is about the genocide, specifically calling our Turkish and Kurdish Christian brothers to confess the genocide and reconcile with the Armenians, Greeks, Syriacs over the genocide. This one's also on Amazon. It's The Expected Awakening in Turkey. Again, I have a pseudonym, Sebastian James, for that. I have that in Turkish and in Armenian. So, I write about culture, things like that. I have my academic papers on like academia, edu, things like that. So
okay, we will link the descriptions to all the stuff that Jacob's written. That if you guys are interested in getting it, again, be aware, be engaging. I mean, I don't think any of these, whether it's my channel, and I'll just speak for everyone else who does similar context, even just like if you're like memorizing the Kalam cosmological argument, like know how to use it. You're not just going to show up into a conversation and randomly just start throwing around big words, and like that's not doing apologetics.
Right.
I'm sorry. Know the content. Have the wisdom to know when to use it and when not to use it. Sometimes you don't even have to use it because God's done quite a bit of work, and you just get to participate in that. I mean, in all of evangelism, we get to participate with God and all these things. And it might just mean, hey, man, Jesus loves you. Come follow him, and they're ready to go. Yeah. So be very wise in your approach, in your apologetics. Especially be aware of the culture of the individuals that you're dealing with. That is, I can't stress that enough, because you don't ever want to offend the individual's culture, and I would say because that's a God-given thing. That is a gift of God to people, and Christianity never calls us to subjugate and change people's cultures into our culture, but rather to amplify and to show the good of cultures, and to celebrate the cultural identity of people in Jesus Christ. Okay, because Christianity is not like Christian culture kind of. It's a strange concept.
If there's any offense, it should be the gospel of Christ.
That's right.
That's the only offense.
That's right.
Yeah.
So with that said, God bless you guys. Take care. I don't think there's anything lined up. Something random might come up with the conversation, but until then, I do have an interview with a guy named Tyson James next week, and we will be talking about middle knowledge. Now, this is we don't want to make a conversation about Molinism per se, because we already have a conversation about Molinism previously, but we want to talk about middle knowledge and what that looks like within like theology. Okay, and he's a great guy he works for Reasonable Faith, and so look forward to that. Until then, God bless you guys and take care.
God bless.